everyone again for being here. Right now, I'll introduce the flow of the event and then we'll get started. So, right now, without further ado, I will introduce Doug Holloway, class of 1976, and Emerson Trustee. Douglas Holloway is president of Rhythm and A9 Records, where with Telon Thelonious Monk III, he produced for Impulse Records the best-selling album Thelonious Monk, Palo Alto. He is the business manager for the state of Thelonious Sphere Monk, and during his distinguished career as a television executive, he served as president of USA Networks, president of NBC Cable Investments, president of NBC's AETN, Shop NBC, Peacock Productions, Weather Plus, and National Geographic International, as well as president of distribution at ION Media Networks and national accounts manager for Time Inc. TV cable and also TV Cable Week magazine. He is one of the creators of the Sci-Fi Channel and Nat Geo Wild and instrumental in development the CBS cable channels. Holloway received the National Cable Television Association Vanguard Award for Marketing, a Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Association for Multi-Ethnicity in Communication, and was named one of Black. Then, two other things. He recently has been featured in Emerson Today article, and we want to take out that two multicultural family channels by and for people of color, developed by him, and UKW Media and Urban TV will offer English language movies, short documentary series, and animated programs for primarily Black, Asian, and Latinx indigenous people. And he made this possible. So without further ado, thank you so much, and I will introduce Doug Holloway.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. I'm glad to be here on a Saturday morning.
Right. So we're going to have Doug. Doug, it's good to see you again, sir. We're going to have just a brief conversation. We wanted to bring Mr. Holloway in here because he's an alum, a trustee, and as I said in our conversations back and forth, is a bit of an example of what we're trying to accomplish today. But before that, we ask you all, for those at home, if you find something interesting, go on Instagram and Twitter, BCE Conference on Instagram, and you can find us on BCE on Twitter and tag everything BCE Conference, and join the conversation. And Doug, before we get started and listen to your bio, I just wanted to point out to you that one of my children's middle name is Thelonious, so that should get me some points as our relationship grows. But if you can, I just want to have a conversation with you and just kind of set the tone for the day. And when we were talking, when you graduated from Emerson in the 70s, you didn't have many role models, and that is to say, Black folks, specifically probably Black men who were in the field that you were getting into. So how did you sort of carve your path through the swamp, as you say, with where there was no clear path and maybe a lot more people trying to pull you down? So how did you navigate that when you were in the position of many of our students that are here and Zooming in?
Well, one of the things that I did while I was at Emerson was pivot. I was a transfer student from Northeastern University, where I studied journalism. And when I came to Emerson, I really was fulfilling my long-term desire to study and be in television. And so I studied television production, and I wanted to be a television director. And, in those days, in 1974, Boston was not necessarily a friendly place for Black young people. And Emerson was not that friendly. And one of the things that I really kind of decided with the help of a gentleman who was by the name of Gene Lothry. Gene Lothry was the general manager. He was Black. He was a young Black man, general manager of WEEI at the time. And I was working there as a news writer at the all news radio station. And I went to him one day and I asked him for some career guidance because EEI was a CBS O&O radio station. And he sat me down and he said, look, you know, I really can't tell you what to do in your career. What you really need to do is decide where you want to be in 20 years. And then write your resume in reverse. Tell me how you got there. So I went back and I never forget, my advisor at the time was Dean Shelton Forrest, who was also a black man. And I went to Dean Forrest and I said, you know, what do you think about this idea? This guy told me to write my resume in reverse, come up with a 20-year plan where I wanted to be in 20 years. And at the time I was 20 years old. So, you know, it was pretty daunting of an assignment, but I took it on nonetheless. And it was interesting. I didn't feel the support nor the understanding of the Emerson community in terms of what I wanted to do as a director. And I wanted to direct television. I wanted to direct drama on television, and that big time television, you know, the three networks. At the time, there were only three networks: ABC, CBS, and NBC. And there were no real blacks in television. There were very few directors. You know, they were in feature films like Gordon Parks, you know, one of the few black directors at the time. And I decided, you know, in my soul searching for where I wanted to be in 20 years, that I didn't really want to be a director. And, you know, during the 1970s, you know, there was a lot going on in civil rights. And we as young people thought, you know, we could do almost anything if we put our minds to it, put our efforts into it. And so I never forget, I had met and became friends with a gentleman by the name of Peter Bino. Peter Bino at the time was at Harvard Law and Business School, getting a joint MBA JD, and we became friends. He was a Bostonian by nature, by origin, and he told me about an MBA. He said, Doug, you know, consider, you know, an MBA long term. Because I was asking him about what an MBA was, and you know, how he liked Harvard and this, that, and the other. And he got me first interested in an MBA because I didn't really know what it was at that point. And it's kind of funny. I went back to Shelton Forrest and I said, Shelton, you know, what do you know about an MBA? He really didn't know anything much about MBA either, because MBAs were kind of novel and new at that point in time. So I decided that in my long-term plan for 20 years, I wanted to be president of a television company, which, you know, at the age of 20 in 1974 was pretty unheard of. But nonetheless, that was what I set my sights on. And I managed to write my resume in reverse. And I studied, you know, the histories, career histories of the top network executives at the time. And one was a sales guy, one was a lawyer, and one was a guy out of the creative community. And I decided that I was going to pursue a career in business, in the business of television, and work my way up and get a degree in finance and marketing, in an MBA in marketing and finance, and then work in finance, marketing, and sales, and then have a career in sales. And so that's what I did. I abandoned desires to be a director. I completed my degree, applied to Columbia University, graduate school of business, got in, and then the rest was kind of history. One of the things that I found out was that in order for me to become a president upon graduating Columbia 20 years later, that I'd have to have a promotion at least every 3 years, because there were seven. I calculated that there were seven different levels of executive rank that I have to pass through to get to be a president, and pretty much that's what I did. So by the time I was 43, 44 years old, I became promoted to my first presidential job at USA Network. I was president of distribution and marketing, and you know, the rest is kind of history.
Right, which brings us to the now. You answered some other questions I had, and I know our time is a little short, and we appreciate you bearing with us. The other thing, in the BCE, we like to consider ourselves as what we call industry agnostic, right? That there are some skills or some universal laws that you can take with you, as you move a TV, the film, the theater, whatever the case may be. And again, one of the things that really excited me about getting you in here is you kind of been in multiple industries, multimedias. You see media evolve.
Wes is muted.
How have you taken those skills and that as you've gone from TV to broadcast to cable to music to film? Some of those skills you learned in those early days at Emerson, and as you go to grad school. But how have you been able to move across industries and maintain a significantly high level of success?
I'll jump in. Tell me the most rewarding thing about your career.
The most rewarding thing that's a deep question. I think the most rewarding thing about my career is what I've been able to give back. Being an Emerson trustee for a very long period of time my career, I was able to be successful not in just positions, but positions of leadership. So, I was one of the founding members of NAMIC, the National Association of Multicultural and Communications. And through that organization, we've done a lot to mentor and promote people of color's careers. I was on the boards of the Emma Bowen Foundation, the T. Howard Foundation, and the IRTS Foundation. And those are foundations that have internship programs for young multicultural people, and was able to affect the careers of, I think, a lot of people because of my, financial rewards in my career. I was able to endow a scholarship that I've raised over several $100,000 for multicultural students at Emerson. The Mary Burrell Scholarship. And now as vice chairman, trying to make some changes to Emerson's community on a positive note. We've been able to dedicate additional financial resources to help struggling students with financial aid. And so in addition to that, I think I've been very fortunate that I've got two sons, one 24, one 26, that are both in the entertainment business. My oldest son is a creative executive for Amazon Studios, and my younger son is in ad sales at the Hallmark Channel. So those things have been very rewarding, that I've been able to affect the careers and lives of other people far beyond what I ever thought I would be able to do.
That's great. Can you hear me? I know we lost.
And now, I think I'm turning out some very good entertainment. I've got 3 OTT services that are currently on Roku. One is called UKW Media, which is targeted to multicultural urban families. It's free to consumers. The second service is called Urban TV, but it's spelled URBN-TV. And it's targeted to multicultural urban adults. And the third is called G-Pop, which is targeted to millennials, Gen Zs, and Gen Xers. And also it's a free service. And we're getting ready to expand beyond the walls of just the Roku platform onto other platforms. And I think, people that are exposed and experienced in viewing my services will find them very rewarding.
That's great. Can you hear me all right, Doug? I know we lost you for a second. Can you hear me? No,
it looks like they're having some technical difficulty in Los Angeles. They are aware that Wes is muted.
Okay.
And Wes, are you okay now?
Yeah, I think, can you hear me, Doug, now? Hello? Hello?
Well, perhaps I can jump in. I think, Mr. Holloway, again, thank you very much for joining us. If maybe I can participate also, like from a student perspective, perhaps we could just get a little bit of your advice as as they look to internships and to graduation and to breaking into this world, pieces of career advice I think would be helpful.
Yeah, the one career advice that, I give young people, and I start with my sons, is that you got to be all in. You really have to be all in and dedicated to what it is that you want to do. And you got to have a plan. I don't think, folks in our situation can afford to be like a leaf in a stream, floating with the currents of your career as it just may happen. And so I'm a big proponent of a long-term plan, 5, 10, 20 years, and work your plan, have it very detailed. When I was putting together my plans, I was very specific in terms of the titles that I wanted, the responsibilities that I wanted, the money that I wanted to make, the kind of companies that I wanted to work for. I've been very fortunate, that I've stayed away from toxic organizations or organizations whose values and mission I didn't believe in. I also had geographic designations that I wanted to really stick to. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, and I spent my entire career working at major media companies that were primarily, when Sixth Avenue was kind of the television capital and Madison Avenue was the advertising capital. I spent my entire careers on Sixth Avenue and Madison Avenue, with one short period that I worked for General Foods in White Plains, New York. But other than that, I was always in Manhattan. And so, I was able to do that because I had very specific goals that I was trying to achieve with my career, and nothing was left to chance. As far as my promotions were concerned, I maintained, an average of 3 years for job changes. And those job changes were typically internal because I spent 26 years at all the associated companies that owned USA Networks. It was Time, Viacom, Paramount, and Universal, and NBC. But it was 26 years in total that I never moved companies. The companies moved, through acquisitions and mergers and such, but I never moved. But within those 26 years, I, constantly got promoted and job changes after, anywhere from, I think the shortest amount of time was probably 2 years to the longest amount of time, which was 3.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think they've solved the issues. I'll pass it to Wes. But what strikes me in your comment is that you were very methodical. I mean, you knew that there were 7 layers. You had a 20-year plan, and you were very proactive about it. I think we as creatives can learn from that, because many times we feel that life is serendipitous, and it is. But it sounds like there's also an element of being proactive and methodical about carving your path and getting there. And Mr. Traylor, come and thank you.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that unless you do, things will happen, and things will happen necessarily for the good. A lot of things can happen for the worst, and if you don't have a plan, that you can be lost. Certain times in my career, there's a really good book called "Who Moved My Cheese." Mm-hmm. There's another good book that I read along the way called Dancing with Elephants. And both of those things gave me kind of insight into what I really need to do and to stick to my guns. For example, there was a period of time when I never thought I'd make it. And I was originally in broadcast television, and I was beating my head against the wall trying to get promoted in the realm of broadcast television, and along comes cable television. And I, was at the forefront of cable television networks. And it was through that planning and pivoting that really made a tremendous change in the trajectory of my career. And, had I not had those plans, probably not good things would have happened to me. Another point in time when I achieved the presidency, and, now I was kind of fulfilled my career goals. And I remember I gave a speech to the graduating class of Black students at Fordham University Graduate School of Business. And I told, the students, my career trajectory story. And at the end of my speech, I took some questions and answers. And one young woman asked me, she says, well, I guess I was about 45, 46 years old at the time. And this woman asked me, she says, well, now you've achieved your career. What's next? Do you have another 20-year plan? And I said, oh, shit, I don't. At the time, I did not. And I am so glad that she reminded me that, I was still at at a high point in my career, but that I really did need another 20-year plan if I was going to survive the next 20 years, because typically in the television industry, by the time you're 50, you're on your way out, if you're not out already in a senior role. And I knew that was kind of on the horizon. And so I took, her challenge, and I made another 20-year plan. And fortunately I did, because not long after that, NBC bought Universal, and I ended up at NBC Universal. And it was, who moves my cheese? Because they took my job and they combined it. So at NBC, I had a counterpart by the name of David Zaslav, who now is head of Discovery, and he's going to be head of Discovery Warner when the merger is completed. But they took my job and they took his job and they combined the two, and they gave that job to him. And then they made up a job and they made me report to him. And the job was a job that they really expected me to decline. And ultimately, they wanted me to leave NBC. But because I had a 20-year plan, I was able to see things in that position. They made me president of Cable Investments. And I was able to see things in that position that I would not have been able to see had I not had that foresight in terms of what I wanted to do long-term with my career of the next phase. And basically, it was kind of their way of like declining me, weeding me out of the organization. They didn't renew my contract, and they paid me as kept me on as a at will employee, which, executives that have the rank of president, that's pretty unheard of. But I took the job and I made the most of it. And after about 3 years of doing that job, I got promoted into another job. Because I was hanging around the hoop, as they say. And it really worked out. And it was really interesting, because what it enabled me to do, I become, an expert in cable and new technologies of television. And the job they promoted me into was pretty unheard of at the time for a cable television executive to go to broadcast television as an executive. And I got promoted into the job of being president of distribution, marketing, affiliate relations, and strategic partnerships for NBC Broadcast Network. And no television executive coming from cable had ever held a job like that. And so, it was through kind of, my happenstance foresight that I was in a position to do that.
Yes, no, thank you. I'll turn it to Wes. I think they've solved it, but just to comment, I think one of the big takeaways is have a plan, but also, especially in today's fast-changing world, things are moving, and so we all, no matter where we are in our stage, need to have a plan and pivot, roll with the punches, and as you say, kind of hang around the hoop. So thank you for that. I think we can all benefit from it. Wes,
all right.
You if you're good.
All right. Now we got the feedback. All right, is that a little better? Okay. All right, so Doug, I hope you can hear me now. You got me? Okay, sorry about those delays. So we did have, we're sort of wrapping up. We have a question from here in LA that we'll pass it off to get some involvement. So go ahead, what's your name, Ross?
Oh, my name's
Yash. All right, I think you can, Doug should be able to see you. Go for it.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if you had any experiences you wanted to talk about that taught you some of the most valuable lessons that you've kind of carried with you through your career. about overcoming adversity, besides 20 years and making a 20-year plan? Any kind of story you wanted to share?
I think the question was that throughout your career, if there's a story you can share that that really exemplified some of the lessons that you learned throughout your career.
Oh, one story. Yes. Let's say, the one story was, I've been, like I said, I've been at USA Network and all the associated companies all the way up to NBC for some 26 years. And I had become an expert in television and cable television and kind of the new technologies. And one lesson was, you see and hear about a lot of executives having ethics issues and trust and how they treat people. And so one of the things I learned from my parents was you always treat people the way you want to be treated. And so I did that religiously. I always treated people, with the highest level of respect and consideration. I paid people well. I promoted people from within. I developed people who were young. I brought in a lot of interns and promoted them and developed their careers. And I reached a point in my career where I was a target. I was Black Enterprise, and I think it was 1997 or so, 98, named me one of the top most powerful Black executives in Hollywood. And that was a list of the likes of Oprah Winfrey and Will Smith and Denzel Washington. And I came up to be number 7, which was, quite I was quite honored to be in that company. And when the NBC merger happened, when NBC bought Universal, I was the highest ranking Black executive at Universal. And I was one of the highest ranking Black executives in the television industry, period. And NBC made the decision that all of the Universal television executives were going to be let go after the merger. And I guess somebody on that side of the equation did not know what to do with me, because nobody, it was kind of rumored that nobody wanted the blood of one of the highest ranking Black executives in Hollywood on their hands. And I had a stellar record at the time. I had, worked for Barry Diller for 5 years. I had, grown the Sci-Fi Channel, USA Network into household names. And someone somewhere said that they accused me of gun jumping. And gun jumping in a merger or acquisition is when executives cooperate with the acquiring company before you're given regulatory authority. And I had been through 9 mergers at that point, so I knew what I was to do and what I was not to do. But anyway, I was accused of it, and I was put under investigation by the SEC and the FCC and the FTC. And they not only investigated me, but all of my direct reports all around the country. And I had 3 offices, New York, Chicago, and LA. And I had a string of executive vice presidents that reported to me. So all of us got put under the microscope. And it was a period of time when, had I not treated those people fairly along the way, that they could have, buckled under that pressure, but they didn't. And had I not had the highest of ethics and moral compass with respect to my dealings in business, I probably would have been succumbed to the investigation. Long story short, the investigation proved that I was not gun jumping, and I was exonerated. And as a result, I was given a job. I was the only executive from the Universal Television Group that was part of the merger that maintained a job when NBC took over. I'm sorry you had technical difficulties, but good luck with the rest of the conference. I'm going to try to tune in for some of it. And thank you for the invitation. It's been a pleasure.